And with that, joining us now is Brad Polumbo, the deputy contributors editor and commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. So, Brad, you've kind of been on this beat for us a little bit. I mean, we've talked about the elections dating back a couple months now, and since then, there has been a little bit of a shift. We've seen Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden kind of surging right now at the top of the polls, and we see someone, for example, Elizabeth Warren. I think last time we talked to you, she was surging, and she kind of be leveling out a little bit right now. Who is surging at the right time?
Yeah, so I think that just like you said a moment ago, the Iowa caucuses are traditionally unpredictable, and the last few weeks have confirmed exactly that for us once again. But I think if you had to parse the polls right now and pick one person who's surging, it's Bernie Sanders, and a lot of people are surprised by that, given just how far left the candidate he is, the most far left, even in this fairly far left Democratic field. But you have to remember, like you mentioned, Iowa's Democratic primary voters aren't even representative of the primary electorate in the whole country, let alone the Democrats or the whole voting base. So you do see Bernie Sanders picking up a late surge, and I think that he'll do well in the first round. It really does come down to who the candidates with the second-tier candidates, the Andrew Yangs, the Tom Steyers, who will their voters flip to in round two is the open-ended question that will determine the final outcome. But right now, Bernie Sanders is in the strongest position, closely matched almost by Joe Biden.
And to your point, too, we saw some of the other candidates, primarily people of color, such as Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Julian Castro. They complained about the fact that Iowa was one of those early states, too, because they said, as you just did, that Iowa isn't representative of the Democratic base. A lot of people say maybe a state like South Carolina or New Mexico should be a little bit sooner up. I see you shaking your head right there. Is there a little, am I wrong to say that?
I'm not sympathetic to them.
Yeah.
When they say that, I'm not sympathetic at all, because if Iowa was a majority black state, that would just mean it would go to Joe Biden even more convincingly.
Yeah.
Joe Biden polls better with black voters, black Democrats, than Kamala Harris or Cory Booker does. So while they have a point that Iowa's not necessarily representative, I think when they start wandering into the woe is me victim politics of, oh, we just got disadvantaged because Iowa is too white, that's when they lose their credibility on that one in my book.
I think that's a really good point. And I mean, as you said, Joe Biden polls the best among those individuals. And then coming in second place is actually Bernie Sanders. So it actually kind of does reflect the way that people in Iowa are feeling, regardless of their race or orientation or whatever it may be. But acknowledging the point that Iowa is a very big Kickstarter for a campaign. I mean, you need to get at least 15% to even get any of those delegates. And it also kind of carries the momentum into New Hampshire, South Carolina, the states that come after it. So who needs to have a big performance in Iowa in order to keep their campaign going?
Well, yeah, exactly. The significance about Iowa is not so much the actual number of delegates that winning it grants to a candidate, so much as the momentum. People like to vote for a winner. They don't like to vote for a loser. So whoever comes out first, second, third, all of a sudden Democrat primary voters in the states that come are going to look at them as the more serious candidates and pick between them. So I think for somebody like Amy Klobuchar, somebody like Pete Buttigieg, Iowa's make or break, right? If they don't make a splash in Iowa, maybe they can hang on through New Hampshire and try to go for the second bite at the apple. But if they don't make a splash in one of these early voting contests, then there's not really ever going to be a spark behind their campaign that they would need to kind of become a front runner, right? So we should keep an eye out on that. Some of the bigger names like Joe Biden, they have staying power. So he could lose both Iowa and New Hampshire. I'm not saying he will, but he could and still be in the race. But for some of the second-tier candidates, it's really do or die time when we start counting the votes on Monday night.
Right, especially for someone like Joe Biden, who could have a big Super Tuesday, for example, after losing those first early states.
Yeah.
He's very much so someone who's polling pretty well in almost every state, so he could still make up that ground later. But one person who I think is kind of the story to keep an eye on is Elizabeth Warren. She just kind of really fell at the wrong time. She's now kind of tanking polls. In fact, there was one today that says Mike Bloomberg surpassed her so far. So what happened to Elizabeth Warren? Is it just, did she have bad policies?
I think Elizabeth Warren got caught up. It's not even so much her policies, right? Because Bernie Sanders has many of the same, and he's doing well. She got called out for being a fraud, frankly. First she had this whole thing where she pitched Medicare for all, but no raising taxes. Voters saw through that, right? Anyone who can do basic math knows that that's not true. Then she's been called out time after time for lies, right? She lied to voters and told them her children only attended public schools. She actually sent one of her children to a private school. She lied about her father being a janitor. Her brother came out and said that's not true. So I think she has an authenticity problem, more so than she has an actual problem with the policies, because the Iowa Democratic primary voters, they're disliking Elizabeth Warren, the candidate, but if they're going for Bernie Sanders, it's clearly not her policies that are making the difference.
Sure. You actually have a great piece in the Examiner that I think everyone should go check out, kind of laying out those different steps in more detail. But I guess it's only a couple days now until we finally have some results. Brad, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you.